Queen Beatrix of the Netherlands prepares to step down after more than 30 years on the throne. Her son will take over as the country's first king in more than 100 years, reviving the debate over the role and relevance of the modern monarchy. Hello there, I'm Shuli Ghosh. You're with Inside Story. Now, there's some of the richest people in the world enjoying privilege and position, but not always power. The abdication of the Netherlands' Queen Beatrix is again casting a spotlight on the world's royal rulers, their wealth, the cost of keeping them, and the benefits to the people they rule over. There are 45 nations in the world with a monarch, and these fall broadly into two categories. There are the absolute monarchies, those with substantial power over legislation and the rule of law. These are largely found in the Middle East, including Jordan, Qatar and Saudi Arabia. Then there are the constitutional monarchies, those with limited or ceremonial roles. These include 10 European countries, Japan, Thailand and the 16 Commonwealth countries that have Britain's Queen Elizabeth as their head of state. The Netherlands also falls into this latter category. Their queen announced her abdication in a nationally televised speech.
Ik treed dan ook niet terug omdat het ambt mij te zwaar zou vallen.
I therefore step down not because the burden of office is too heavy, but because of the conviction that the responsibility for our nation should now lie in the hands of a new generation. It is with the greatest confidence that I will hand over the kingship on 30th of April of this year to my son, the Prince of Orange. He and Princess Maxima are fully prepared for their future task.
Well, let's introduce today's guests. In London, Andrew Child, director of the anti-monarchy campaign group Republic. Joining us from Amsterdam, Mark van der Linden. He's the chief editor of the Dutch publication Royalty magazine. And also in London, David Haig, a financial marketing expert and CEO and founder of Brand Finance. Gentlemen, welcome to the programme. Mark, let me start with you. There had been speculation for quite some time that Queen Beatrix was going to step down. In fact, there is a family history of that, isn't there?
Yeah, we are used to the fact that the queens in our country are stepping down, are abdicating in favour of the heir to the throne at a certain age. And as you said, a lot of people were expecting the moment that Queen Beatrix was announcing her abdication.
And what feelings has her abdication caused? I mean, she was a popular queen, wasn't she?
She's extremely popular, and but people respect her decision. They are not in shock. They're just in shock by the fact that they didn't expect it on a Monday evening. They expected to do it on a birthday or the birthday of the Crown Prince, but not yesterday evening. But they respect her decision. They are happy that she's going to have some time to enjoy her life, do whatever she wants to do, and that we're going to have a new king and an even more popular queen.
Well, monarchies are popular in certain countries, not universally so, though. Andrew, I know that Republic is part of an international alliance of Republican organisations that are against monarchies. Why is that?
Well, we're against the monarchy because we believe that all of us are born equal, not some are born more equal than others.
OK.
And I think that's why most people around the world are opposed to monarchies. In fact, most countries are republics these days.
But lots of families are born into power and privilege. They're not necessarily royal, but the royal family is just one of many hierarchical families.
But they provide our head of state. I mean, that's the point.
A ceremonial role, though, in the UK.
Citizens are barred from becoming Britain's head of state.
OK, what about that intangible feeling of national identity? I mean, people talk about the British Queen as giving them a sense of British identity. Does that not count for anything?
Well, I think you're talking about history, which is a very complex thing. I don't think our history should necessarily dictate our future. You know, on that basis, we'd still have slavery. I don't think the Queen these days does really reflect British identity. I think most people would say that British identity had more to do with our public institutions like our NHS, our school system. And these are things that our royal family don't use.
It's an interesting point, David. The question of what makes you feel British and whether the monarchy is part of that is one thing. The other thing is that people argue that they cost money. They cost the taxpayers money.
Well, I really don't think that's a very valid argument at all. There are two issues here. One is an issue of principle, whether or not families should inherit the title to head of state. And then the other one is the pragmatic argument about whether it works in practice and whether it works economically. I think if you actually contrast constitutional monarchies with constitutional presidencies, I think many people would say there is little to choose between them. In fact, they might not want to choose the American system, the Indian system, or many other systems in preference to a constitutional monarchy. They think it's quite a neat way of giving them little power, but giving them the headship of state.
Okay.
But putting that argument aside, on the economic front, there is no question that the money that it costs to run the royal family is very limited, and the benefits that they confer are very significant. And it would be foolish economically to actually dump the royal family.
Well, of course, one of the arguments against having royal families is the cost of keeping them. And top of the royal family tree in Europe is the Netherlands' outgoing monarch. Last year, Queen Beatrix cost Dutch taxpayers a little over $48 million. That eclipsed Britain's Queen Elizabeth. Big cuts to the royal budget meant her individual bill went down to some $46 million. King Juan Carlos of Spain gets almost $11 million from the Spanish government. That's relatively low. He too is making cuts, though, because of the economic crisis. And by contrast, the cost of having a president in France is actually a whole lot more. The public bill for François Hollande is estimated at almost $137 million. Now, just a note that none of those figures, by the way, include the millions spent on security. Mark, so it seems that the outgoing Queen Beatrix is the most expensive royal family, certainly in Europe.
Well, I don't really believe that. It's a question how you look at the figures. In the Netherlands, they're very transparent, and every cost of the monarchy is added to that bill. In other countries, for instance Belgium, you don't see a lot of cost. They are hidden in the cost of other ministries in that country. So it's very hard to compare the cost of the monarchy in every country if you don't have all the figures, really. You also have to look at the fact that nobody is really opposing the monarchy in this country. Roughly 80% is in favor of the monarchy, and even the parties that are Republican are not putting their feelings about the monarchy really in their statements in election times, because they know it's going to lose them some votes.
Andrew, do you agree with that? No one is really opposing the monarchy in these countries.
Look, first of all, I have to challenge your assessment of the costs of monarchy across Europe. Britain's monarchy is by far the most costly. We're looking at £200 million a year and more. 120 million of that alone is security costs. I mean, it's huge. It dwarfs anything else, really. By comparison, if you're looking at how much the President of the Republic of Ireland costs, you're looking at less than £1 million. So on a value for money basis, the Windsors just don't really cut it at all.
All right, well, David's our man with the figures on this, because, David, I know that you've tried to quantify some of the financial benefits that the UK royal family bring. I read that one calculation has the Jubilee celebrations estimated to have generated something like £2.4 billion worth of revenues. Can we quantify what they give back to us?
Yes, we can, but it's not entirely straightforward. We have to pull together a number of data sources to calculate what it is. And the way we looked at it was we put a value on the assets that are employed in running the monarchy. So we have things like the Crown Estate, the Royal Collection, the Duchy of Lancaster, the Duchy of Cornwall. And they are worth about $30 billion, but they belong to the state, so there's no loss to the state. We then look at the revenues that are generated, and they come from increased tourism, support for UK businesses, general level of morale. Now, there are costs, but most of the costs would be there anyway. If we had a presidency, a very small fraction of those royal costs would be removed. In fact, it's arguable they would be at least the same, if not more, because I think it's fair to say the royal family are very parsimonious in the way that they operate. So I don't think there's much of an argument on the cost front. Now, there is an argument that some of the uplift in revenue would be there anyway, but I don't believe that. I think some of it would, but a large chunk of it comes from the true royal family being there rather than the palaces being there alone.
What do you say to that, Andrew? I see you shaking your head there.
I'm sorry, but David knows full well there was a huge hit on the economy as a result of the Jubilee. I mean, you know, it was estimated to be a net loss of about 1.2 billion, and you know, part of that, you know, comes from an extra public holiday. And I'm not going to argue with people, you know, having a bit of extra holiday. People work very hard, but you know, let's get our facts straight. Tourism has always been.
No, but I absolutely disagree.
Argument.
I absolutely disagree with you.
It's always been a nonsense argument. Well, you must let me finish on the tourism argument. You've had your say, David.
Yeah,
now
Andrew,
I'll have
go ahead
mine.
and finish your point,
Look,
and then David, you can answer.
If tourism was really, you know, a big pull for people, then you know, the seat and symbol of the British monarchy, Buckingham Palace, would not be struggling to make it into the top 50 visitor attractions in the UK, and I'm afraid it does struggle. And you know, the notion of tourism is based on the idea that if we move to a republic, then you know, all of our royal history would just disappear, and that's clearly nonsense. If you look at the Republic of France, and you look at the number of people that visit Versailles every year, I mean, it's millions of people. It's in the world's top 50 tourist destinations. So the idea that this really has any kind of bearing on tourism is just a complete nonsense.
David, what do you say to that?
Do you want me to answer that question?
Please.
Well, I think the point that I would make is, yes, last year there was an extra day's holiday as a result of the Jubilee, and yes, that cost the economy money. But let's face it, that was the Queen's 60th anniversary. She had one on her 50th and one on her 25th. You don't get that kind of effect very often. Whereas the uplift effect on the UK economy in terms of tourism, accommodation, merchandise, retail goes on year after year after year. And I think most commentators would accept that is the case. We've calculated that it's at least £1 billion a year of extra revenue from that activity. Now, the other thing that seems to be being ignored is the effect of coats of arms and royal endorsements to English products. We've calculated that that brings in $1 billion a year for those firms. And all you've got to do is look at places like Asprey's and Fortnum's and all the others to see that it conveys a level of luxury to those businesses which creates extra demand and extra prices. There's no question economically that the royal family is beneficial.
Mark, what's your view on this?
Well, I do think the British royal family has a problem because it's too big. What Queen Beatrix has done in this country is to modernize the royal family, as it's the main characters is the Queen at the moment and the Crown Prince, his wife, and that's it. The rest of the family is not getting a state allowance. They are making their own money. They are paying taxes.
But Mark,
no taxpayers
Queen
are paying for them.
Beatrix's personal fortune is estimated at something like $40 billion. Now, the question is there a place for a family?
She wish.
In this day and age of austerity cuts and you know the economic crisis that many European countries are facing, many critics might say that there is no place for a privileged family like that.
The Queen, the father of the Queen said that the royal family's value is around 250 million euros. That's far less than what you just said. I think they would gladly change things they have for the money you just mentioned. They don't own the palaces. They are getting a salary from the state. They're cutting down costs all the time. I'm not defending the fact that it costs a lot of money, but it also brings in a lot. And I think for smaller countries like the Netherlands, it works very well to have a monarchy and to have a royal representative for state functions like state visits, for the economics. Last week I was with the Queen in Brunei and Singapore with a huge business delegation. They brought in a lot of people for the Dutch economy, and that's working very well.
OK, so let's just talk about how the royals are perceived and another of their roles, which is as role models, and how that can go badly wrong. Prince Harry hit the headlines earlier this year when pictures of him emerged partying in Las Vegas naked. Princess Stephanie of Monaco was labelled a wild child by her own mother, Grace Kelly, and she gained notoriety for affairs rather than royal duties. And Juan Carlos of Spain caused a stir when he was caught on an elephant hunt in Botswana, holidaying with a woman who wasn't his wife. Andrew, when you hear stories like this, do you feel that it adds to the argument that perhaps royal families have had their day?
Well, I think so. I mean, you know, to be fair to Harry, we all sometimes sort of fall short of the standards we set ourselves. But to put these people on a pedestal and say they're better than the rest of us and have higher standards than the rest of us is clearly a nonsense. I mean, yeah, not just looking at Harry in Las Vegas, but, you know, also when he was talking about taking people out of the game in reference to killing people in Afghanistan. It's really not appropriate. But, you know, even the Queen lets us down sometimes. I mean, we had the dictator's dinner when the Queen invited people over to celebrate her Diamond Jubilee, and these included the King of Bahrain, the King of Swaziland, and these people are dictators who brutalise their people.
Mark, do you think that, that scandals like these damage the royals?
Oh, I mean, scandals and royals have been very good partners for centuries. There's books written about them, and I love reading them, and everybody loves reading.
Yeah, we love a good royal scandal, don't we?
Prince Harry naked. We all enjoyed those pictures. We all speaking about it. At the same time, President Clinton, his cigars, Monica Lewinsky, we can add a lot of politicians who also created scandal. We're all humans. That's what we say in the Netherlands.
David, do we just put too much, I suppose, too much value on or pressure on our royals to fulfil certain roles?
Well, I think one thing is that it is fair to say that the monarchy is being scaled back, precisely to avoid some of those embarrassments with the minor royals. I mean, clearly Harry is a young guy and he enjoys having a good time. And as Mark said, you know, everyone has a private life, everyone has a social life, everyone has a sex life. The trouble with our media is they are extremely intrusive on the royal family, and every single move they make is being filmed. They're not really allowed their privacy. When you look at the things he's done, generally speaking, they're not particularly offensive. And I think actually a lot of the things Harry has done have made the royals seem more attractive, not less attractive to people.
Let's have a look at the kind of response we've had on Facebook. It's a very mixed response, as you can imagine. Arnold Richard Aluma Amari says it's still relevant so as to preserve our rich history and heritage. We also had this one from Mariana Kazilla, a waste of taxpayers' money, useless. Marika Fox adds, the European royal families in general do not rule as a leader. They're the ones who maintain ties with other nations, which in return helps our economies. And Greg Thorne says, I think if there is to be any monarchy at all, then New Zealand has the best system. Our Queen is as far away as is geographically possible. Mark, I was quite interested to hear that there are some 21 royal families without a country to reign over. The royal families are still there, but their monarchies have been abolished.
Oh, there are even more of them, but it's and they're all very sad, and they all, you know, live in a state of denial and pretending that they're still. I mean, they're addressed by Your Majesty, Your Royal Highness, and they're not obviously anymore. They lost most of their property, and that's sad. And that's also in the heads of the current monarchs. Obviously, they don't want to lose their position. They don't want to, and that's what Queen Beatrix has done. Her main thing was to, you know, hand over the monarchy in a very good state to her son, and she's done that. There have been scandals, but not created by the Queen. There has been a lot of discussion, but strangely, the Dutch still see her as a figurehead, and they much rather see her as head of state, or her son as head of state, than a politician who is promising things that they even won't keep after the elections.
Mark, there's been various studies in the UK. There was one back in 2003 where the researcher concluded that although nearly half the people in that survey thought the monarch should simply be a figurehead with no power, the vast majority were against replacing her with a president. So, I mean, there doesn't seem to be any kind of campaign about getting rid of the royal family.
Absolutely not. There's, as I said, 80% of the Dutch are in favour of the monarchy. There's no discussion, and political parties who are opposing the monarchy don't even make a big thing of that, because they are losing the votes. At the same time, most of the Dutch are very open and very liberal towards people who have Republican views. It's not that they are against each other, and most Republicans actually have said that Queen Beatrix has done a marvelous job, and that she has made it very difficult for them.
Andrew, arguing for a republic is not a popular political position, is it?
Well, we represent about 25% of the British population, so that's more than 12 million people. I would say that's a pretty significant voice, given that we don't have huge access to the media. We're certainly not getting anything like 25% of the media coverage of royal events. But we are having a debate, and opinion is changing progressively. And, I firmly believe that come King Charles, people will have serious doubts about the future of the monarchy, and I wouldn't be fighting the fight that I'm fighting if I didn't believe that during my lifetime we would have a republic.
It's interesting because you talk about everyone should be born equal, etc. But the royal family in these countries are so benign. I mean, it could be a lot worse. You look at Thailand, where you can be sent to jail for even daring to mildly insult the king there.
That's scarcely a great endorsement for monarchy, though, is it? I mean, I've already identified for you many monarchies that do a pretty dreadful job, to be honest. Just because we have a slightly better one doesn't mean that that's our most optimal outcome. Frankly, I think they do much better in Ireland, where they have presidents who have popularity up in the 90s, and these are people who are well into their terms of office, and they've been directly elected by the people, and they speak for the people. And there are countries all the time that are looking to move to becoming a republic. Jamaica is the latest one.
David?
Why do they want to do that? Because that it's democratic. It's the right thing to do.
David, do you agree with this assessment from Andrew that there will, by the time Prince Charles becomes king, there will be serious questions about whether the UK and other countries need a monarchy?
Well, I think obviously the questions about whether there should or shouldn't be a monarchy will go on and on. And my views economically don't necessarily reflect my views politically. I'm a liberal, and I wouldn't expect to see a monarchy, an unelected monarchy, interfering in key decisions of state. And I think the real acid test is whether they ever start to try and do that. Now, Prince Charles over the years has become quite vocal about various issues, and the Queen, by contrast, basically keeps her mouth shut. She doesn't express an opinion about anything. She recognises her role as a head of state who should not interfere. And I think as long as that continues, the monarchy will go on being popular. If we have an unelected king
about the royal
who starts
veto,
interfering
David?
in policy, if we have an unelected king who starts interfering, I think we would have a problem. And there may be a veto, but it's not exercised. And if it were, I think the antipathy to the royal family
But we know
would grow
it is.
dramatically.
We've just revealed that, David. I think you're not quite up to speed on that.
The reason that
Andrew.
it's popular is because it's perceived by the majority not to interfere.
Andrew, what's your point about the veto?
Well, our freedom of information investigations have revealed that actually the Queen and Prince Charles do run the rule over our legislation and do pass comment on legislation, because we allow the monarchy to veto legislation. Anything that affects the Queen and Charles as landholders, comes under their purview.
Mark,
which is an extraordinary
what's your
power.
response to that?
And I don't know what people... Go on.
Well, I think that the thing with monarchy is that it's like the price of fish on the market. One bad king and it all changes. As Andrew has said, there's a big chance that there's going to be some republics if some royal families are not changing and not modernizing. At the same time, I don't think England is going to be a republic in his lifetime.
Gentlemen, it's been a great discussion. Thank you very much indeed for taking part in today's Inside Story. I want to thank all my guests, Andrew Child, Mark van der Linden,
You're very welcome.
and David Haig. And before we go, some online reaction to one of our previous programmes on the issue of same-sex marriage. Shana left this post on our website. She says, about time those old archaic ideas went the way of the dinosaurs, just like slavery. And this from Anon. It is not a worldwide trend. It's basically a Western trend. It is not acceptable in Africa or Asia. And that's it from us. If you do want to send us any reactions, then tweet us at AJ Inside Story or email us at insidestory@aljazeera.net. But from me, Shuli Ghosh, for now. Bye-bye.